So we're going to get into assumptions that we're working from. And I want to just start off by saying these assumptions are very countercultural. This is not what you hear mainstream. And so knowing that, you probably haven't heard this, and it might you might find yourself where these assumptions resonate well with you and it gives language for it. You also might find yourself extremely skeptical. And we welcome that. We assume that's going to happen. We're used to skepticism and some pushback because it is really countercultural. And so I guess my encouragement in hearing these assumptions is that you would think critically and just hear this as an alternative and consider it, but know that if skepticism is there, that's welcomed and that's okay. That feels important we're not trying to convert you into our way of thinking. We're not trying to proselytize. We're just presenting an alternative and something that we've seen that's been really helpful for all these women in our own families.
So the first assumption that we come from is that our bodies work. So this concept of body trust and listening to hunger and fullness cues being something that we truly can rely on. So I think our bodies give us cues around a lot of things, if it's going to the bathroom or being tired, but there isn't a lot of cultural messaging around trusting one's body, right? There's a lot of media messages that interact with that. And we would say, yes, our bodies work, and we believe that is a really core foundational piece to how we interact with our kids about food and their bodies, is believing that their body knows what to do with the food and that they can listen to their hunger and fullness and recognize that is a way that their body and their metabolism is communicating with them, that's sort of the voice of their metabolism. And so there's a lot of research that backs up that children, when given an environment of trust, that when parents and caregivers do trust their own cues, that they do develop a healthy and balanced relationship with food and their bodies. And so there's a lot that can interrupt that, but it's our birthright. It's something we're all born with, to know when we need food and when we've had enough. And so we come from the assumption that is something that as parents and caregivers that we can trust, is that our bodies work.
And similarly, in the second assumption, movement being our birthright, similar to the body trust, is that we are born with a nature to move. And so if we find ourselves on the continuum of abusing exercise, being compulsive, ritualistic, or the other end of the continuum of being resistant, avoidant, low motivation, that something has broken that trust and that kind of essentialness of who we are, that we're born to move, and that our bodies want to do that with ease and without a lot of effort.
And then the third assumption that we come from is a philosophy of care that we founded our treatment program here on, and just the way that we view health and health care, and it's called Health at Every Size. And you can kind of jump to some conclusions based on that phrase, but I think the most important thing to hear about health at every size is just that the belief that our health is not determined by our weight. So the BMI and that proxy of health in our culture is pretty mainstream, that, okay, so somebody is in this particular BMI, that makes them healthy, this BMI makes them unhealthy. And Health at Every Size breaks out of that paradigm, and it moves to just make it a more complex conversation, to say what are all the factors that impact health, what are all the factors that impact weight, and allow there to be more of a conversation around that. And you'll hear this interwoven into this, is that, yes, that Health at Every Size is a place that we start with this conversation, that our kids are going to have a variety of shapes and sizes, and we as adults have a variety of shapes and sizes, and there can be health across the spectrum of size. When we think about the body trust and the ways that our culture gives us messages against it, this left column talks about the diet mentality, which is what I would call more the mainstream cultural values around food and body. And these are some of the spirits that I would say our culture provide, which is a spirit of rigidity and fear and shame. And this body trust that I was talking about, and relying more on hunger, fullness, is more this attuned. There's more of a satisfaction and trust and internal cues and acceptance and freedom that comes with it. So thank you, yeah. Okay, so and then the last assumption we come from is that our brains are moldable and flexible, and just kind of that plasticity of the brain. There's so much research coming out about that, and we haven't, even begin to kind of tap into that and bring that into our work. But here's kind of the start. So take a second and just look at this picture, and just take in what you see. And I would just ask, what some of you just to say what you see. What do you recognize? What would you describe that scene to be?
Family.
Family. Okay. What are they doing?
Hanging out.
Hanging out. Okay. All right. Anyone else? What else do you see about that specifically? If that family's hanging out, where might they be hanging out?
Living room.
Living room? Okay, so inside of a home structure, in a living room. Does anyone else see them not inside of a room?
A tree in the back with a window to the inside.
That could be, yep, could be a tree. It also could be a woman holding something up, you know, a box of something on top of her head in a different culture than our own. Or it could be, yes, a family sitting around a home with a TV on the wall and that being the corner of the home. So that being, yeah, sure of how much we can see different things and change our perspective and have that change. So.
And just to add the hopefulness, I guess, of what we know to be true about brain plasticity, that we're adaptable. And so I think that's such a relieving message, particularly as a parent, that we're not, that we can't screw up our kids indefinitely, right? Even if we're changing our perspective on, and maybe making a whole shift in some of the values or philosophies that we're working from, that we're moldable and adaptable, and then also our children are moldable and adaptable. And I find a lot of relief in that. That, yeah, they're not destined for failure or something if we're screwing up. I'm going to talk a bit about current cultural responses, and I'm addressing the response to the quote-unquote obesity epidemic and the impact that's had. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about some of what's happened in terms of the response. And you know, I think it's very well-meaning, both politically, in the education system, and the idea is that that we are going to help our kids if we give them good information and education on nutrition, if we give them access to healthy foods, if we change things in our PE curriculum to help them become more active, that this will help the kids and help reduce the obesity that's happening in our culture. And what people are finding is that this is backfiring. It isn't working. And I think why it's not working is that it doesn't encompass kind of the psychological, how we respond psychologically, because there's so much fear in the obesity that because there's a fear base and a coercive, in some ways a coercive approach that leads to resistance. It can lead to higher levels of shame, guilt, preoccupation with food and body image, which can increase negative coping strategies for, adults and kids and people of any age. So there was a recent study on school lunches even, right? So they've been trying to change to have healthier food in school lunches, and they showed that, that the kids were serving up more fruits and vegetables on their tray, but because of some of the pressure about having to eat these fruits and vegetables, they actually saw that the consumption was less with the kids when there was more pressure put on eating these as a healthy alternative. It's not building kind of that body trust. It's kind of being told what kids need to do. And as we know, actually, a lot in treatment, the resistance that happens when people are feeling some of that, coerciveness or being told what to do, or that there's anxiety and fear behind it. So I'm just going to show a quick clip about New York public schools.
I would just name too, one of the things that this current approach does, I think it facilitates this connection between overweight and not being beautiful, right? So, and that was really reinforced, I think, by the way that the interviewer did that, and just like the link, and I think that's only going to contribute to more bullying around size, but that definitely like, oh, you are not overweight, that is a horrible thing. When in all actuality, there are kids that are very healthy that might be overweight, and so how do they take in that information and process that if that's the cultural message to try to counteract it?
Right. And then additionally, we also chose that video to show just this approach of more education is somehow going to help our kids, and how schools are trying to manage that. And I also, Tam knows this because my kids go to the same school, but I've definitely I've met with our PE teacher at Bryant and tried to just understand more about the PE curriculum and the Seattle Public School PE curriculum. We actually met with the PE educator for the whole Seattle school district to try to understand their mentality behind it. And what we learned is that we can't do much on the curriculum, but a lot is how are the teachers implementing this curriculum, and what language are they using, and how are they discussing it with the kids,
and what supplemental things could be added.
Right.
Like they're sometimes able to add things.
Right.